Okay, so types of drawings. If you use a planning drawing, if you use a planning drawing which shows you the wall positions, the thicknesses, and some of the basic materials, then if you gave them to a builder, your planning drawings would give you a price accuracy of about 30 to 40%, because each builder is going to interpret those drawings in a slightly different way. They're going to use these bricks, or they're going to use that type of flat roofing system, and you just can't tell. So just be aware that that those planning drawings have limited information. So as you build up the information, building regulations or the technical drawings, they're going to show you the construction standards that are required, and you can expect maybe a price accuracy on those between, say, 15 and 20%. Again, quite a large variation. You know, if you're spending £100,000, you think, well, I'm not going to go with the builder that gave me £120,000, I'm going to go with the builder of the £100,000. But you don't really know exactly what they're going to do, even with building regulation drawings. And it's not until you get into the level of production information, or the technical drawings, which show the setting out and importantly the details of which material specifically am I going to use, that you can expect to get a price comparison. That is what we're doing. We're going to 3 builders, and each one is going to present me a different price. The further I go down this list, is the sharper my price is going to be at the end. And often people will come to me and say, please, can you price these planning drawings? And I'll say, yes, but my price is going to be 40% different to the next, and so therefore more information first. So, underestimation. Council planning, we talked about that when I mentioned that one earlier. Really, these days with the planning rules that changed, each local authority is paid on a performance chart. So if they determine and give you a decision within 8 weeks, once the project has been validated, after 8 weeks, they're paid because they determined that decision at 8 weeks. If they let it go to 10 weeks, then they don't get the money, you see. So they're very keen to make a decision at that 8-week stage. So if you've got something slightly complicated, like maybe a different shaped profile, or you're asking for a little bit too much space, or you've got 2 or 3, you've got a side extension and a double-story rear extension, then expect to be pushed back. So allow enough planning time. So not only is it 12 weeks for the first application, then the planning officers make some comments right in the last week or so, 7 days. You don't have time to change the drawings in this current climate. Then you have to submit again. So again, another 3 or 4 months. So materials and supply times. A lot of the lovely doors that we see around here, they will take 3 months to arrive. Ask any of these companies here, and so when you're starting a 3-month build, then you've almost got to be ordering the doors on the first day. But practically that's not possible because your foundations haven't been built, some of the walls aren't up, you can't make the measurements. So it's very difficult. So your project will naturally extend from a 3-month build to maybe a 5-month build for a typical rear extension, simply because of the supply times. The budget plus 30%. This is the contingency. So the builder's saying 25 or 45,000. Be realistic. Give yourself some contingency. For my job, sometimes I only put down 5%, not the jobs that I do for other people, but for my own work and my own house. And I always get it wrong. Why did I only allow 5%? It's not enough. Underestimate the value of good design. We touched on that earlier with the interior designers and the value of having watching the right TV program, or talking to the right architect, or getting a good interior designer. That's where you're really going to enhance your project. But getting the objects in the right positions, moving the kitchen from one side of the house to the other side of the house, just because you got given that opportunity right early on, and you thought, well, maybe I'll just keep the kitchen in the same place because that's where the plumbing is. It's not necessarily the right answer. Many people underestimate the time to tender a project. When you go to 3 or 5 builders, they will regularly, for even a 45 or a modest £100,000 spend on a project, it could take you 6 months to tender just to find the right builder. And therefore, from submitting your planning drawings to planning applications, that's 6 months, and 6 months tendering. From starting a project to spending 45,000 could take you 1 year just to organise it, and then your building is going to go on from there. Now, we've looked at this. Sometimes people use cheaper materials, and I think that that's a great shame. Much better to hire a nice bit of solid oak. I say use a nice piece of solid oak rather than, say, a photograph of a piece of oak. Yes, the photograph of the oak, it's a little bit more slippy, it works, but it's only £5 a square metre, and it probably only lasts 5 months. Whereas a nice solid piece of oak is naturally going to last a little bit longer. So the life cycle costing of the materials is try and build for that future a little bit. If you're using a natural slate, it's going to last a lot longer than a man-made slate. I like talking about this one. I'm not sure why it's in that particular devalue the property, but I talk about glass sliding doors because I have a thing about the UPVC doors. Plastic doors, I've been lucky enough to hire twice on one building. The client's built a lovely rear extension. The father-in-law was buying the plastic doors, and so the UPVC doors were paid for. They got installed. Then after 2 or 3 years, the customer lived and enjoyed the house and with her free doors, and then she came to sell it. And the new owners then rang me up and they said, can I help them modify the original extension? And by the way, we don't want the plastic doors. So they literally only had a shelf life of about 3 years. Now, UPVC are fantastic for keeping out drafts, nice, cheap, cost-effective doors, but not for sliding doors that face a garden. You won't see any UPVC doors here today. They're all aluminium, they're timber, they're metal, and they will last longer. Definitely worth the investment. The 25% rule that I've written there is more to do with when you put those doors in, allow a little time for improving the insulation to the rest of your building. A SAP rating, which, if some of you don't know, the SAP rating is a mathematical calculation that looks at the heat loss of a building over 1 year. So if you put in glass sliding doors, you are likely to exceed the building regulation rule of 25% glass to extension. So if your extension is 20 square meters, you can only have 5 square meters of glass, which is 2.5 doors. There's not very much glass, so you can't have any roof lights, only 2.5 doors for an average 20-meter extension. So most people will hit 50, 60% glass. And what that means is that you have to have a SAP rating done for the rest of the house, and you have to look at your heat loss for the whole building. So if you have lots of insulation in the loft, you may pass your SAP rating. If you put insulation under the floor and the ground floor area, again, you will probably pass your SAP rating. But it's looking at the whole heat loss. So, let's move on. Being held to ransom by the builder. I hope some of you are writing a few things down, not so much because I'm saying important things, but more in terms of questions that we're going to look at in a minute. So, I think they have a roving microphone that they can go round with in a minute, and we can take some questions. Pay a reasonable price to the builder. Wow, no, I'm going to choose the cheapest quote. Hang on a sec, I have 4 quotes, and that's the cheapest, that's the one I'm going to go with. Can't communicate with them because they're Polish. I love Polish people, but difficult on the price. Always pay the reasonable price. If you price five prices and one's say 180, 2 are around the 195 to 105, and then one is at 75, there's a reason. Maybe they've misinterpreted some of the drawings. The average price is the one that you should go for. Judge companies on past experience. A quotation or an estimate, there's a difference between these two. A quotation is more fixed, an estimate is, well, it's my guess just as it is yours. Builders should always give you a letterhead with a detailed breakdown. A detailed breakdown is a scope of work. A scope of work, if I go to the supermarket and I want to get 100 items, it's quite difficult to remember those 100 items without a good list. A detailed breakdown, if you're spending £100,000, you want at least 150 items on your breakdown to break it down to like units of 300, 400, 800, etc., etc. If you don't have that detailed breakdown, if it's like just 2 pages, we'll do the foundations for 25 grand, we'll do the roof for 15 grand, you don't know what you're getting. You have to expect a detailed breakdown. Hopefully a friend or a colleague will have recommended the builder. Is the contractor a member of an organisation? See examples of his built work. Never pay in advance. Every week I hear that one. Oh, I paid the builder in advance and they're not around anymore. Because you lose control unless you have a contract. If you have a contract, you have more control.